Jason's first day at a new school was everything he expected and more. The moment he stepped off the bus, he could feel the nervousness twist in his stomach. He had moved to the town only a week ago, and everything still felt foreign. The school was large, with long hallways and crowded classrooms. As he walked toward the entrance, he noticed how everyone seemed to already know each other. They were laughing, chatting, and walking in groups like they had been friends for years. Jason, on the other hand, felt like an outsider, like he didn't belong. His shoes clicked softly on the pavement as he approached the front doors. The sun was shining and the air smelled fresh, but none of it mattered to him right now. He was thinking about the upcoming day, wondering if he'd fit in or if he'd spend the whole day alone. When he entered the school, he was greeted by a hallway full of students heading to their first classes. Some glanced at him, but most didn't seem to care. It wasn't easy being the new kid, and Jason knew that this wasn't going to be a walk in the park. He took a deep breath and reminded himself that he had to make the most of it. He found his locker, a small metal box with his name written on it in a neat script. The sound of lockers opening and closing filled the hallway, along with the chatter of students. Jason tried to ignore the butterflies in his stomach as he opened his locker and placed his books inside. His eyes flickered to the other students around him, many of them already talking with their friends. He felt like a stranger in this busy world. Just as he was about to close his locker, a voice interrupted his thoughts. "Hey, new kid." Jason turned to see a tall boy standing next to him. He had short, messy hair and a confident look in his eyes. It was Tyler, the guy everyone knew at school, the one who seemed to be at the center of every conversation, the one who always had something to say. Tyler stood there for a moment, sizing Jason up with a grin on his face. "You look a little lost," Tyler said, his voice carrying across the crowded hallway. "What's your deal? You gonna be the quiet type who just fades into the background?" Jason shifted uncomfortably. He wasn't used to being the center of attention, especially in a new school where everyone already had their own groups. Tyler's words felt harsh, but Jason didn't want to engage. He wasn't interested in making enemies on his first day. "I'm just trying to find my way around," Jason said quietly, closing his locker and standing up straighter. Tyler smirked. "Yeah, whatever. But trust me, you might want to stop dreaming so big. This isn't the place for that kind of stuff. Here, you've got to know how things work." Jason didn't respond. He wasn't sure what Tyler meant, but he didn't want to waste time arguing. He glanced at the clock on the wall. It was almost time for his first class. "Good luck," Tyler added, turning and walking away without waiting for a response. Jason stood there for a moment, still processing what had just happened. He didn't know why Tyler had singled him out, but he was sure of one thing. He had to make the most of this day, no matter how awkward it felt. As the bell rang, signaling the start of the school day, Jason took a deep breath and headed to his first class, hoping that things would get easier as the day went on. Jason's first few days at school were exactly what he had expected: awkward and lonely. He spent his lunch breaks sitting by himself, trying to stay invisible. He noticed how everyone already had their friends, their groups, and he felt like he was the odd one out. It wasn't easy to be the new kid, especially when you didn't know anyone. But the worst part of all was Tyler. The moment Jason had stepped into the school on his first day, Tyler had made it clear that he didn't belong. Every day, Tyler found ways to make Jason feel small, to make him feel like he was nothing special. At first, Jason tried to ignore him. He thought if he didn't respond, maybe Tyler would get bored and move on, but that never happened. One day during lunch, Jason sat alone at a table near the back of the cafeteria, reading a book to pass the time. He didn't like to eat alone, but it was better than sitting around awkwardly, waiting for someone to talk to him. Tyler noticed him immediately, of course. Jason could feel his eyes on him even before Tyler walked over. "Hey, new kid." Tyler's voice rang out, loud enough for half the cafeteria to hear. Jason looked up, but instead of responding, he tried to go back to his book. He wasn't in the mood for another one of Tyler's teasing. Tyler wasn't about to let that go. He sat down across from Jason, his tray of food clattering onto the table. "What's that you're reading? Another one of those boring books?" he sneered. Jason didn't answer, hoping Tyler would get the hint and leave him alone. But Tyler wasn't someone who took hints. Tyler continued, "You really need to stop acting like you're better than everyone else just because you're new. Nobody cares about your big dreams here." Jason could feel his face getting hot. He wanted to tell Tyler to leave him alone, but instead, he stayed quiet, letting the words wash over him. Tyler was like this every day, always trying to get a reaction, always trying to make people feel less than they were. It was clear that Tyler had a way of making everyone around him feel like they were doing something wrong. "Seriously," Tyler went on, "you think you're going to be the next big thing. Newsflash, nobody here cares. You're just another kid in a sea of other kids. Stop dreaming. People like you don't get special treatment." Tyler's words were sharp, cutting through the air like a knife. Jason finally looked up from his book, meeting Tyler's eyes for the first time. He wasn't sure what to say, but something inside him told him to stand his ground. "Maybe I don't need to be special to have a dream," he said quietly. He didn't raise his voice or try to challenge Tyler. He just spoke honestly, hoping the words would be enough. Tyler stared at him for a moment, a mix of confusion and amusement in his eyes. Then, with a shrug, he stood up and walked away, leaving Jason alone once again. But this time, something felt different. Jason realized that he didn't have to let Tyler's words define him. He didn't have to be afraid of someone who didn't even know him. The rest of lunch passed in silence, but Jason couldn't help but feel a small spark of confidence. Maybe he didn't need Tyler's approval after all. Jason's days at school passed slowly. He was getting used to the constant whispers and the way some students seemed to avoid him. The lunchroom was still the hardest part of his day. It felt like everyone already had their place, and Jason was just trying to figure out where he fit in. He spent most of his time reading, quietly watching the others from a distance, hoping someone would notice him and maybe invite him to sit with them. But so far, that hadn't happened. The worst part, though, was Tyler. Every time Jason tried to enjoy some peace during lunch or in the hallways, Tyler seemed to be right there, waiting to make his day harder. He would call out to Jason, taunt him, and make fun of the way Jason carried himself. Jason wasn't sure why Tyler singled him out, but it was starting to get under his skin. One afternoon, as Jason was sitting at his usual spot in the cafeteria, he could hear Tyler's loud voice before he even saw him. Jason sighed, bracing himself for the next round of teasing. Well, if it isn't Mr. Big Dreams," Tyler said, walking over with a smirk on his face. He dropped his tray on the table, sitting down across from Jason without asking, "You still reading those books about space and the future? Gonna be the next rocket scientist or something?" Jason didn't want to respond. He just wanted to enjoy his lunch without any more trouble. But Tyler wasn't about to let him off the hook. "Look, man, you need to get real. This school isn't going to hand you your dreams on a silver platter. People here don't care about your big ideas. Nobody's going to remember you for being the quiet, smart kid. People like you are just invisible." Jason stared at Tyler, trying to keep his calm. He could feel the anger bubbling inside him, but he knew that reacting would just give Tyler more power. So he tried his best to stay quiet, focusing on the sandwich in front of him instead of Tyler's words. Tyler, seeing that Jason wasn't biting, leaned in closer. "You're probably the type of kid who believes he's going to change the world, huh? What do you think? You're going to walk into a big company someday and get a job just because you dream big. That's not how it works, dreamer." His voice grew louder, drawing the attention of a few nearby students. Jason felt his face turn red. He hated being the center of attention, especially when it was for something like this. The teasing felt endless, and Tyler seemed to take joy in it. "Seriously, you need to stop pretending like you're different. We all have to deal with real life. The sooner you figure that out, the better." Tyler's words cut through the air like a sharp knife. Jason wasn't sure how to respond. The words stung more than he expected. He wasn't sure if it was the way Tyler said them or the fact that he was surrounded by other students who were listening. He wanted to stand up for himself, to tell Tyler to mind his own business, but something held him back. Instead, Jason just quietly packed up his things. He didn't want to give Tyler the satisfaction of a reaction. As he stood up and walked away from the table, he could feel Tyler's eyes following him, the weight of his mocking words still heavy in the air. Jason didn't know what the future held or if he'd ever find a place where he truly belonged. But one thing was clear. He wasn't going to let Tyler's words destroy his dreams. No matter how hard Tyler tried, Jason wasn't ready to give up. A few days passed, and Jason thought he had figured out how to deal with Tyler. He stayed quiet whenever the bully came around, doing his best to avoid confrontation. But despite his best efforts, Tyler seemed to find new ways to torment him. It wasn't just in the cafeteria anymore. Tyler was even starting to make snide comments in class, whenever the teacher wasn't looking. Jason knew he couldn't keep letting Tyler get under his skin, but the constant teasing was starting to wear him down. One afternoon during gym class, Jason found himself alone on the basketball court. Most of the other kids were gathered in groups, playing or chatting with each other, but Jason preferred the quiet of the court. He wasn't much of a player, but the act of dribbling the ball and shooting it into the hoop helped him clear his mind. The sound of the ball bouncing against the floor and the rhythm of his movements felt like a way to escape from everything happening around him. As he bounced the ball, he saw Tyler coming his way from the corner of his eye. Jason sighed, preparing himself for whatever Tyler was about to say. But today, Tyler didn't make a sarcastic comment right away. Instead, he stood on the edge of the court, watching Jason for a few moments. Jason didn't say anything. He kept playing, pretending that Tyler wasn't there. Finally, Tyler spoke, his voice different than before. "So, you really like basketball?" he asked, sounding almost curious. Jason paused, surprised by the question. He looked at Tyler, unsure if this was a setup for another round of teasing. But there was something in Tyler's tone that made him wonder if maybe, just maybe, Tyler was asking out of genuine interest. "Yeah, I like it," Jason answered quietly, still not sure where this was going. Tyler raised an eyebrow. "I didn't think you were into sports. You don't look like the type." Jason didn't know what to say. He wasn't the best at sports, but basketball had always been something he enjoyed. "I'm not a pro or anything. I just like playing. Helps me think." Tyler stood there for a while, still watching him. Jason could feel the tension in the air, unsure if this was just another way for Tyler to mock him. But then, Tyler said something that Jason didn't expect. "You know, you're kind of different," Tyler said slowly. "I thought you were one of those kids who just sat there, doing nothing, but you actually do stuff. You're not afraid to be yourself." Jason blinked, trying to process what Tyler had just said. This wasn't the usual mocking tone. In fact, it sounded almost like a compliment. "Don't get any ideas," Tyler added quickly, almost like he wanted to cover up what he had just said. "I'm not saying you're special or anything. I just thought you were, well, boring." Jason smiled a little to himself, not because of what Tyler said, but because it was the first time Tyler had ever said something that wasn't meant to hurt him. Maybe Tyler wasn't as bad as he seemed. Maybe, deep down, he was just trying to figure things out too. "Thanks," Jason said, not expecting to feel a bit lighter after the conversation. Tyler didn't reply. He just turned and walked away. Jason watched him go, still holding the basketball in his hands. For the first time in a while, he didn't feel so alone. Maybe Tyler wasn't going to be the one who made Jason's days harder after all. Maybe things were starting to change. The days seemed to blur together for Jason, but something had shifted. Tyler's usual teasing had stopped, and instead, there was an awkward sort of truce between them. Jason wasn't sure how to feel about it. After all, Tyler hadn't exactly apologized, but at least he wasn't being cruel anymore. Jason kept to himself, but he noticed that Tyler was sometimes less distant, even if it was just a quick glance or a passing word. One afternoon, Jason was sitting at his locker, organizing his books for the next class when he heard footsteps approaching. He glanced up, half expecting to see Tyler coming over for another round of sarcastic comments. But to his surprise, Tyler didn't mock him. Instead, he leaned against the locker next to Jason's. "Hey, new kid," Tyler said, his voice sounding more casual than it ever had before. "You got any plans this weekend?" Jason looked up, caught off guard. He wasn't used to Tyler being so normal. No, not really. Just gonna hang out, I guess." Tyler nodded, shifting his weight. "You know, my family's doing the thing this weekend. We're all meeting at this park for a barbecue. You could come. It's not a big deal or anything. I mean, I don't really care if you show up. But, yeah." Jason was stunned. Tyler had invited him to something. It didn't make any sense. Was this some kind of prank? Jason hesitated, unsure if he should say yes. But then, he remembered how things had been lately. Tyler hadn't been mocking him as much. Maybe this was a chance to understand him better, or at least try. Okay, I'll think about it, Jason said, trying to sound casual, though he was feeling a little nervous inside. Tyler gave a small shrug. Cool, it's just something to do. Not everyone's into big crowds, though. Jason wasn't sure if Tyler was genuinely inviting him out of kindness or just because he wanted company. But either way, he felt a little more at ease. Maybe Tyler wasn't as bad as he had first thought. Maybe they both had more in common than either of them realized. Later that week, Jason found himself walking toward the park where the barbecue was being held. He had never imagined he would actually go to one of Tyler's family gatherings, but there he was, trying to push past the nervousness creeping in. When he arrived, he saw Tyler immediately. He was surrounded by family and friends, talking and laughing with the others. Tyler noticed Jason right away and waved him over, a genuine smile on his face. "You made it. I thought you were gonna bail," he said, sounding surprised but pleased. Jason smiled back, feeling a little lighter. "I almost did, but here I am." "Good choice," Tyler said, handing him a plate with some food. The atmosphere wasn't what Jason had expected at all. People were laughing, telling stories, and there was a sense of warmth in the air. Tyler's family was kind to him, treating him like just another person. No teasing, no judgment, just friendly conversations. As the evening went on, Jason realized something important. Tyler wasn't the bully he had thought he was. He had his flaws, sure, but maybe he was just trying to fit in too. Maybe everyone, including Jason, had a side to them that others didn't see. By the time the sun was setting and the barbecue was winding down, Jason felt like he had learned something new, not just about Tyler, but about himself too. As they parted ways, Tyler gave him a nod. "See you at school, dreamer." Jason smiled. "Yeah, see you." Walking home that night, Jason couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. Things weren't perfect, but for the first time, he felt like he was beginning to understand the people around him, Tyler included. And maybe, just maybe, things were starting to get better. The days after the barbecue felt different for Jason. There was a strange sense of calm hanging in the air, almost like things were starting to fall into place. The teasing from Tyler had stopped entirely, and although Jason wasn't sure what had caused the change, he was starting to think it was a good thing. For once, he felt like he was being treated like everyone else. School felt less daunting. The whispers in the hallways didn't seem as loud anymore, and even the cafeteria felt less intimidating. Jason still sat by himself during lunch, but it didn't bother him as much. He was finally getting used to the idea that he didn't need to fit into anyone's group to feel like he belonged. He had his dreams, his interests, and those things mattered more than anything else. One afternoon, while walking through the school courtyard, Jason noticed Tyler sitting on one of the benches. It wasn't unusual for Tyler to be hanging out with his usual group, but today he was alone. Jason hesitated for a moment, not sure whether he should approach him. But then, he remembered how things had gone at the barbecue. Maybe it wouldn't hurt to talk to him again. "Hey," Jason said, walking up to the bench. Tyler looked up, surprised but not annoyed. "Oh, hey, what's up?" Jason sat down on the bench next to him, unsure of what to say next. They hadn't really talked much since the barbecue, and the silence felt strange between them. "Just thought I'd come over, check in." Tyler nodded slowly, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Yeah, I get that. Been kinda quiet around here lately, huh?" "Yeah," Jason agreed, feeling the quiet between them grow a little less awkward. "Guess I'm just getting used to it." Tyler glanced around the courtyard, his hands resting on his lap. "Same here. Honestly, I don't know why I used to act like I did. I guess I was just trying to make up for not knowing who I really was, you know?" Jason blinked, surprised by Tyler's honesty. He had never expected Tyler to open up like this, let alone admit something like that. "I get it. I guess I was kind of the same, trying to figure things out, you know?" Tyler looked at him, his expression thoughtful. "Yeah, I guess that's why I've been different lately. I don't know. I feel like I've been holding on to something that wasn't me. Maybe I've been too harsh on people, and especially on you." Jason was taken aback by Tyler's words. He had never heard Tyler admit something like this before, and it made him feel like maybe, just maybe, Tyler wasn't the person he had first thought. "I never really understood you," Jason said quietly, "but I think I'm starting to." Tyler shrugged, looking a little embarrassed. "Yeah, well, I'm not perfect. I'm still figuring it out, but I don't want to make people feel like I did before." Jason nodded, feeling a shift in the air between them. It was strange, but he felt like Tyler was trying to change, to become someone better. And for the first time, Jason realized that maybe people could change. Maybe they weren't all locked into the roles they had been given. "I appreciate it," Jason said softly, unsure of how to respond to this new side of Tyler. Tyler gave him a genuine smile. "No problem. Just thought you should know." The bell rang, signaling the end of lunch. Jason stood up, feeling like something important had just happened. As he walked away, he realized that things had started to shift. He wasn't just learning about other people. He was learning about himself, too. And maybe that was the most important lesson of all. A few weeks had passed since that unexpected conversation with Tyler. Jason had noticed a subtle shift in the way things were going at school. The pressure he had felt from the teasing and the constant need to fit in had started to ease. He wasn't completely free of doubt, but he was beginning to feel more comfortable in his own skin. School wasn't so much of a battlefield anymore. One afternoon, after school had ended, Jason was walking home when he spotted Tyler in front of the school gates waiting. It wasn't unusual for Tyler to be hanging around after school, but today, there was something different about the way he stood there. He seemed tense, almost like he was waiting for someone or something. Jason slowed down, unsure whether he should keep walking or approach him. He wasn't sure how to feel. After all, they had barely spoken outside of school, and even then, their conversations had been brief and casual. But something told Jason that this wasn't just a coincidence. "Hey," Jason called out, taking a few steps toward him. Tyler looked up, his face softening when he saw Jason. "Oh, hey, I was actually waiting for you. Got something I need to talk to you about." Jason raised an eyebrow. "What's up?" Tyler shifted his weight, looking uncertain for a moment before he spoke again. "Look, I've been thinking a lot lately about everything, and I wanted to say I'm sorry for all the stuff I said to you before. I was just trying to look tough, and I wasn't thinking about how it might make you feel." Jason stood there, his mind racing. He hadn't expected Tyler to apologize, especially not in this way. It took him a moment to process Tyler's words. For a while, Jason had convinced himself that things would never change, that Tyler would always be the bully. But now standing in front of him, Tyler was different. He wasn't the same person who had mocked him relentlessly just a few months ago. "I didn't think you'd ever apologize," Jason said, his voice softer than he expected. Tyler scratched the back of his neck, looking a little uncomfortable. "Yeah, well, I've been an idiot. I know that. I didn't get why you always kept to yourself. But I think I'm starting to understand now. We're all just trying to figure things out, right? I'm not perfect, and I'm still not great at talking about stuff, but I wanted to let you know I regret being a jerk." Jason took a deep breath. He wasn't sure what to say. The apology had taken him by surprise, and he had never imagined Tyler would ever admit he was wrong. But as he stood there, Jason realized that maybe he didn't need to say anything back. Sometimes just hearing someone own up to their mistakes was enough. "You don't need to say sorry," Jason said after a pause. "I get it. People mess up. What matters is that you're trying to be better." Tyler gave a small, almost shy smile. "Thanks. I appreciate that. I really do. And if you ever want to hang out sometime, just let me know." Jason felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He had never imagined that he would hear these words from Tyler. But here they were. The tension between them was gone, replaced by something that felt like understanding. "Sure," Jason said, his voice light. "I'll keep that in mind." As they parted ways, Jason couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. For the first time, he realized that change was possible, not just for him, but for anyone. People could grow, make mistakes, and learn from them. And maybe, just maybe, they could move forward without carrying the weight of the past. Jason walked home with a lighter heart, The world didn't feel so heavy anymore, and that was enough to make him feel hopeful about the future. The days after their conversation felt different for Jason. School had never been perfect, but now it felt like he had finally found his place in it. He was no longer the kid who avoided the hallways or sat alone in the cafeteria. Slowly but surely, he was beginning to find his rhythm. It was a small change, but it was enough to make him feel like he was moving forward. Tyler, on the other hand, was still in Jason's thoughts. Ever since their talk, he'd noticed that Tyler had changed. There were no more teasing remarks, no more of the mocking looks that had once been a part of their daily interactions. It was almost as if Tyler had become a different person, and in some ways, Jason couldn't help but admire him for it. It wasn't easy to change, especially when you had a reputation to protect, but Tyler was doing it, little by little. One afternoon, as Jason sat in the library, reading a book about space exploration, he heard footsteps approaching. He didn't need to look up to know it was Tyler. He recognized the sound of his footsteps by now. Tyler had been hanging out with him more often lately, not just after school, but during lunch too. They'd sit in the library or at the park, talking about everything from video games to the future. It was nice, and Jason found himself looking forward to their conversations. "Hey, dreamer," Tyler said as he sat down across from Jason, his usual grin on his face. "What's up?" Jason smiled back, feeling a sense of ease he hadn't experienced before. "Not much. Just reading about rockets." Of course, Tyler teased, but there was no malice in his tone. "What's your plan anyway? Going to space?" Jason chuckled. "Maybe one day. I mean, I'm not exactly going to be an astronaut, but I'm still interested in all of it." Tyler nodded, looking thoughtful for a moment. "You know, I've been thinking about that. Space, the future, all that stuff. I never really got it before, but I think I get it now. It's about pushing limits, right?" Jason was surprised by his words. Tyler, the guy who had always seemed more focused on fitting in than thinking about the big picture, was now talking about ambition. Jason felt a shift in his perspective. Maybe Tyler was finally seeing what he had always dreamed about, the possibility of something bigger. "I guess so," Jason replied. "It's about looking beyond where you are now and trying to make things better, you know?" Tyler smiled, leaning back in his chair. "Yeah, I think I'm starting to see that." There was a moment of silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Jason realized that, somehow, they had reached a place where they could understand each other better. It wasn't about fitting in or trying to be someone they weren't. It was about being honest with themselves and with each other. As the bell rang, signaling the end of lunch, Tyler stood up. "Well, I should probably get going. See you later, dreamer." Jason watched him go, feeling a sense of peace. Tyler was different now, and so was he. They had both changed, in their own ways, and maybe that was enough. Jason walked out of the library with a smile on his face. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, it didn't seem so scary. Maybe it was because he finally realized that dreams weren't just for the distant future. They started here in the present, and he was ready to take the next step. With the sound of his footsteps echoing in the empty hallway, Jason knew he was ready for whatever came next.